Hello. Welcome back to the Wild at Esports podcast. My name is Snitch, and I'm once again joined by my fabulous co-hosts, the intelligent Dooms and the wonderful Excoundrel. Welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to talk about the upcoming Horizon Cup finals, going over what has happened at the Horizon Cup so far, kind of giving our rundown on what's happened, what's been going on, giving our views on these amazing games that have had, been undertaken. How's your Horizon Cup been, Excoundrel?
It has been good. I have had fun. I haven't been casting the last few days, mainly because I've been at work. But I will be doing a little bit of casting before the end of the event, so I'll get to do a little bit more, which will be nice at the very least. But yeah, I had a good time, man. It's been good to see the other regions in action, and it's just nice to see a bit of international competition as well. I think that's what a lot of us have been craving. It's great to have a bit of inter-European competition, but the international competition is kind of where it's at. Most memes can be forged in the fires of international competition. Alas, all the memes are just us sucking, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It was fun anyway, and I think it's been a good display of Wild Rift so far.
Yeah, and Dooms, how is your... obviously, you have not been on the desk. I'm surprised they didn't invite you, You're far more handsome than Excoundrel is, so they definitely could give you points for that one. But how has your Horizon Cup been watching? I've seen you doing some YouTube analysis.
Yeah, I was surprised you not been invited, but yeah, I guess next year maybe. So I've enjoyed the YouTube live, the cringy YouTube live, as you might say, but I'm starting it. And yeah, I've been really enjoying the gameplay so far, hoping to be able to analyze some more games, interesting ones, maybe get people to understand more concepts in Wild Rift. Yeah, I've been really surprised by the international level. Some regions we talked about in episode 1 and maybe said, they will be beaten, and they surprised us a lot. Others, just raced from the stars and destroyed everything on their path. So yeah, we're looking forward to discussing it with both of you today.
How about you, Snitch, mate? Co-streaming every day, you've been enjoying it?
Yeah, no, it's been a really good time, actually. Really enjoying it. Had a lot of great times with Darkbreaker, aka Tweetmaker. Had Stu on there. Been talking with Leroy as well, if you're familiar with Leroy, he's the Southeast Asian streamer. Yeah, it's been a great experience, honestly, because obviously we have quite conflicting understandings of the game. Not dramatically so, but he's got that Southeast Asian perspective. Even had Iraqi Zoro on the stream yesterday, so that was pretty fun. You get some NA.
Iraqi's been smurfing it. I think he's been smurfing it on the desk. I've been really, really impressed with Iraqi. So.
No, I agree. I think he's had really good analysis, to be honest. I mean, I know there's the banter of NA and... I never see you and all this, but
we all really, I can't say the word. Sorry, guys, PG. We all really suck. So yeah, we can't really banter NA anymore.
He's done it again. At least we're past the 30-second YouTube interval, so
we're past that
monetization. We're golden.
What do you guys think then? Let's start off with Group A, I guess, because we can kind of run down the teams and sort of talk about the outcomes, because we know the outcomes of the groups now. We know exactly where everyone is. And Dooms has very kindly suggested we start from the bottom up, so we get to talk about our favourite teams first. Of course, Tribe. Tribe's a sad one for me because I've had plenty of discussions about this, and those guys are close friends of mine, all of them from the Vainglory era. They're Vainglory world champions. They've had a lot of experience, and I remember talking very openly with Anna Doom about phones versus iPads and how long you need to adjust. And I'm sure Snitch might be able to offer some insight on this. But I just feel bad that I think they should have made the call to switch to phones earlier. I think most people knew that phones were going to be the competitive parity, if that's what you call it. I mean, you could get into the semantics about iPads versus phone and how much advantage one or the other would give you, but I'm of the opinion that I'm not sure you get massive advantages from playing on an iPad versus a phone. But regardless, I think if you're a team the team is seriously preparing for an international Wild Rift competition, I think most teams realize that phones would be the standard, to ensure that every team is playing on the same exact level playing field for competition. So I think most teams had made that switch. I know Rick's did it pretty significantly in advance of the Origin series, right? But these guys weren't restricted in America to play on iPads. So they were allowed to play on iPads all the way through the American competition. And of course, I think they wanted to give themselves the best chance at winning America and maybe kind of put to the wayside a little bit of the international competition because, they won America, so they were going in the first place. But when you've played on iPad for 4 years in Vainglory, sometimes plus than that, even if you give yourself 3 months, you're never going to be as good as you were on the device that you've played for 4 years on, I don't think. So I think that's something that Tribe will need to I think they should all make that switch now, because if we're going to be stuck on phones for at least 2 years, I think there's a deal that's like 2 years worth of international competition, or like 2 years worth of Riot competition is on like phones. You need to make that switch permanently now, realistically, if you're Tribe, and you kind of have to come out of this and say, yeah, okay, we need more practice on phones. We need to get, raise our level to the point that it was on iPads. But regardless, even if they were as good as they were on iPads on phones, I'm still not certain they would have made it out the group. I mean, SBTC definitely would have given them a bit of an angle because they weren't playing great at the start of the tournament. But I still think Tribe would have been very likely one of the bottom two, just because I think the West in general was a little bit behind the pace of the meta and the Eastern teams. But I'd like to loop in you here, Snitch, because you might have a bit of a differing opinion to me on that. But that's just how I feel. Tribe's tournament was a bit scuppered before it even started because they were just coming in at a serious, I think, device disadvantage realistically. But I also don't think they would have made it out of groups regardless.
No, I totally think that's fair. I mean, at least from my perspective on Rix, I mean, I would say, to their credit, I don't think we made the switch either until it was, confirmed that it would be phones only. We very aggressively asked, we tried to get information very ahead of time, will it be phones only? Because we knew we had 2 tablet players and we weren't sure about, LAN restrictions. So we did try to get that information as soon as we could, and then as soon as we knew, everybody switched, right? Leon and Friend both just dropped iPad literally the day of. And they started practicing. I remember Friend taking 2 days plus to set up his UI on his phone because he had a really specific UI on tablets. He was trying to take ages to get the perfect UI, and he was going through 10 different renditions on Discord, which is pretty funny. I think, as you say,
Joey Skaggs did the same thing.
Yeah, Joey was the same. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, yeah, it is kind of the silver lining is that it is it is just the Horizon Cup. Obviously, that's easier to say down the line than right now, but I think it's better for them to you'd rather this is the one that you don't do well in rather than next year maybe, which is the Worlds. Everybody has a lot more time and you have more time on phone, and then maybe that's a Worlds you can actually perform at, and it's the actual official Worlds, right? Whereas this is just the kind of an international taster, so maybe that's more, they can at least be confident in the future, as you say, switching to those devices. I think I do agree that they probably wouldn't have made it out of the group even if they were on iPads. I don't know, I'll bring it up again, I think, with Team Queso as well down the line, but both teams to me really felt and I feel this happened to me in the past as well, and during my international experiences, is they really just kind of got lost in the world source. And I think it's a combination of you play a bunch of scrims and you're against these really high mechanical competitive teams, they really push you to the edge. You're picking up new staff, because I think both teams did this as well right before, and I think this could be pretty dangerous. I know Iraqi had a lot of things to say about this, where he really didn't like that Tribe got new staff right before, and it's not necessarily anything against the the coach that didn't get Glacier, he obviously has a lot of pedigree, but it's just more bringing in that new massive voice right before an international event like this, combined all these scrims which maybe aren't going well, and I feel they really just lost their identity. I don't think we saw anything particularly close, honestly, to the way Tribe at least were playing in NA. We didn't see any of this Ash pick that NA was super known for. NA had this 4 mid meta thing, right? And even talking to Iraqi and things like this, they weren't giving up on that. They weren't thinking there's no way this could work anymore. There's no way we can 4 mid at international. It's just they kind of just lost that vibe. I feel they really just became a very different looking team, and it was almost they were kind of now we're Asia light. Now we're trying to play like China, we're trying to play like SEA, but we're learning it later. So we're just a weaker version of those kind of teams. And they didn't really have as much of that kind of unique draw that I think they had within NA. And it didn't feel they brought NA to Horizon. It felt they came to Horizon and then they morphed into this weird kind of pseudo Eastern team. And they kind of lost how they were themselves. I don't know how you feel about that, Dooms, necessarily, especially with the coaching angle.
Yeah, the whole iPad phone theory is something I don't know. I don't feel really related with it. Why? I understand it's an issue, but I also believe they could have switched earlier if they wanted. They prefer to, I guess, assure NA qualification. It's something we can understand. Okay, why not? If I'm trying to put myself in their skin. Okay, what do they have to focus now? What do they have to get out of this tournament? As you say, there's a whole, okay, how do we adapt as a playstyle? Because it was obvious they wanted to adapt to whatever they faced in scrims. It's something you gotta adapt to, but as you say, yeah, NA don't have the same characteristics, I'm gonna succeed, as China have. They're way more mechanically skilled in China, whereas NA might have really other stuff they've been practicing for months. I think the best thing to do, even with such short notices, it's to practice what you've been practicing, to show what you can do, insist on that. Bringing another staff is something that feels really good. Like we've talked about it in episode 1 even. I predicted that it would be a good thing if, and that's a big if you don't control the team. Like I believe as you TQ did that too, but Guard wasn't the head coach. You still got Elke, who did a really good job by the way. Like I might be biased since I love that guy, but yeah, he's been doing a really good job. And Guard has taken maybe a less important, less crucial central role, whereas Glaciox really tried to bring his principles, but you can't do it at it. I don't know since how long they've been working together, but 1-2 weeks maybe 3. You can't do that just as much. You gotta keep your same priors. You gotta keep the way you're playing. You can improve stuff and serve as an exterior eye of how can I bring what you all do guys good together, but you can't change the core play style. That's what I feel they've maybe been trying too much to do. Maybe because of scrims, maybe because of coach himself. We don't know, and we'll never know. It's up to Tribe themselves to improve that. Yeah, it's a huge point. I think we can't even know if they would have qualified if they didn't do that, because we just simply didn't see Tribe as a whole. Like we felt like we didn't see SBTC in the first 2 days, maybe. Well, I think we didn't see Tribe at all in the 4 days. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next competitions. And maybe next year, why not, to truly see what NA can bring to internationals.
Definitely felt a little bit of time with Tribe was like starting versus the world in some of these games. I mean, starting I think is really cracked. I think he's a great player. But yeah, what I would say is that, because this brings us nicely onto the next team that we kind of wanted to talk about, and I appreciate that we have a limited time today, so I don't want to get stuck talking about Tribe forever. I think TSM brought what they were good at, and actually it worked a little bit. I know it didn't get them out of groups, but I think TSM were just like, F it. Like, we're just good at drafting these big team fight comps. I think was Snitch, did you post that Carlito meme? I can't remember who posted that Carlito meme. But legit, that is something that worked for TSM. Like, we even had in our story documents, there was this big point about like Carlito on Galio. And like Carlito gets Galio, they know it works for them. These big kind of heavy CC fight. It's the same with Ebro, by the way, when we come to them. They have this similar style, which is basically like, let's just draft CC. Let's just draft a team fight. And like literally both teams are just like press button go. Like, it doesn't matter if have you guys ever heard the MLXG meme where it's like
the 4K behind,
when I'm
even
4K
gold,
behind, I have to engage because my team's a little bit behind and we need to win this team fight. When I'm 10K behind, I have to engage because it's our only chance of getting it. I felt like the Latin America and the South American teams were very much like that. they got behind, and the only way they knew to dig themselves out of the hole was by team fighting. And so like they kind of felt like they just kept team fighting and kept digging and digging, hoping that they ended up on the other side. But TSM were a little bit like that, and they just drafted these big team fight comps. It didn't get them out of groups, but it certainly caused some upsets, and certainly there were some situations where TSM felt like they were close to getting out of some sticky situations. So yeah, that's a team that was surprising to me. I thought TSM were going to get rickrolled in this tournament. I genuinely thought they were going to get steamrolled. But they didn't. And I think it's because they did exactly the opposite of Tribe, which is like came in. They didn't try to adapt to this Chinese meta that a lot of the other teams were doing, which is like this heavy carry jungler. They were just like, we're good at team fighting, guys. Let's just stick to team fighting, and they did it. And yeah, it didn't get them out of groups, but they beat Tribe, and they certainly took some other teams to close series. So that's what surprised me about TSM, is just that actually they stuck to what they were good at, and that worked for them. And yeah, okay, they did require specific drafts, I think, to really feel comfortable and really look okay. Galio on Carlito being one of them, but I think overall, what you saw from TSM was a team that was not afraid to say, well, F your meta, our meta might just be better. And yeah, okay, they may not have had the sort of the ability to pull it off at the same level that the other teams did, but I think that was the approach that I would have liked to have seen from both Queso and Tribe, realistically. Like, I don't think 3 weeks is enough time for you to suddenly say, well, we can do what they do, but better. I think actually you have to come in and say, well, maybe we can do what we do really well, and if we do it really well, then we might catch them off guard. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by TSM, honestly, Snitch.
No, I totally agree. I mean, TSM, I think, honestly, may have been my favorite team to watch during the whole group stage. Like, I think Titus was, honestly, he might have been my favorite jungler. I don't know if I could call him the best jungler, realistically, but I think with regards to how he actually played as a jungler and with that within that identity of like being a jungler, I think he had like a really interesting champion pool. You know, he's one of the other players playing the Jarvan jungle, like you say, it's very unique. But he had very high tempo games where he was like chain ganking certain lanes, which I think a lot of teams aren't doing. I think ganking in the tournament in general is pretty much non-existent. Every jungler is just running mid at level 3 and clearing waves of the mid laner. And Titus is like, screw that, man, I'm gonna camp bot. And he like ganked bot level 2 with Jarvan, and then he chain ganked again. And like, you know, I think TSM just had like these way more, like you say, they really just played to their own style. You know, they were like, okay, yeah, Varus is really good, we'll play that. But other people are like playing, you know, the Xayah and the Kai'Sa and whatnot. And Petroni's like, screw it, I'm going Lucian every game. I'm just going to build Blade of the Ruined King, Black Cleaver, and just play super early game. We're just going to brawl and all this, you know. And I did really enjoy that about them. And, you know, they were one of the only teams to almost beat Darkon Gaming. Like, they had a really solid game 1 against them. You know, they almost took the series off KT. They almost took the series off SBTC, you know. Like, they were really close. Like, and I would have loved to see them make it further. Because, like, like you say, I think comparing them to like Tribe, Queso, and even Ebro, I think those 3 teams kind of lost their way a bit in kind of this scrim meta, whereas TSM really held on to what they liked and what they thought they were good at, and they definitely brought it, you know, into the group stage.
I'll talk about Ebro later. They were my favorite team to watch. But the Dooms, what did you think about TSM?
As you say, yeah, I was really impressed by Tidis in particular. Like maybe less Carlito, I didn't watch him that closely, but Tidis was really impressive. He was, as Stitch said, really one of the junglers who stood out and impacted his team a lot. And also, it didn't feel like a couple junglers were impactful. Of course, there's your favorite Huiba and others, but he's the only one for me that stood out.
Huiba, my favorite mid laner. You're right.
He was the only one. It was the only jungler who impacted his team a lot while not being the central role of his team. Like his team didn't play for him, but he still carried the heck out of this, and that's simply amazing. And a lot of stuff that maybe less people see, but TSM's drafts were absolutely huge. Like if you just look at it. Against Tribe, their 2 victories, they got Seda, who's absolutely broken, and Renekton. They got then Ziggs and Galio. They love it, yeah, Ziggs, of course. Even against DKG, they managed to get Renekton against Fiora. They managed to get their Lee Sin, which TTS is fabulous on. They even managed to get a game of KT, which is really wonderful, especially seeing KT's performances. Again, through their Galio, through their Camille, Jarvan if needed. They're really adapting really well what has to be adapted, but they're really keeping a core prio of, okay, this is what we want to play, this is how we want to play, this is how we'll succeed. And yeah, it might sound really simple and easy, but that's how you're supposed to play Wild Rift, I think. And they understood
like
that.
Those drafts versus Tribe were less about drafting well, about Tribe drafting terribly.
maybe.
I mean, I feel like if you come away with Senna, Galio, Zig, something's gone horribly wrong on the other side of the draft. But you know,
in some matches, both teams drafted horribly. So yeah, it's a good thing to at least.
No, that's very true. That's very true. No, I think we could all agree TSM was definitely surprised, and I think Snitch, you're 100% right. I feel like your heart wanted TSM to get out the group just because of the way they kind of surpassed expectations. I think realistically, if you look at the people who qualified out the groups just from the very top level, I don't think anyone's expectations were smashed. I think this is legitimately what you expected based on the competition going in. There was probably a bit of a flip between Team Queso and Sengoku, but we'll get to that in Group B. SBTC then, that's to me one of the more interesting stories in this tournament because they shat the bed at the start of the tournament. Like, I don't know what happened to SBTC when they came into this tournament, but they were tilted clearly. It took them a few days to get into the game. It's difficult for me to make heads or tails of SBTC because I don't think they were playing the same meta as Team Secret and DKG. I think, you know, those 2 teams had a very, very clear adaptation to a certain style of play. And SBTC, to me, I think obviously TF was the big name on that team coming into the tournament. Like TF was a lot of people widely touting as one of the best junglers in the world. I won't say that I was overwhelmed by TF's play this tournament. I think towards the latter end of the groups, his Lee Sin did look really good. But then again, I think the best Lee Sin in the entire tournament was Rush because Rush was just an absolute beast on that pick. But, you know, I think also like looking towards Julie and Kiral, those are the kind of guys who actually stepped up when SBTC needed them. I think Kiral's Varus is really, really nice. And I think Julie actually kind of grew into mid a bit more throughout the tournament. What do you think went wrong though with SBTC at the start? Because to me, they didn't look like they were playing anywhere near the level they were playing at the SEA series, Snitch.
Yeah, I mean, I think Julie 3 was definitely a big question mark. I think had a lot of weak performances, especially during the first few days for sure. I think even just the opening series, that time he was playing Yasuo and Weeba just killed him under the tower. We all stood there like, is that how that was meant to happen? But yeah, it's definitely a bit weird to see. I think certainly you have to question Uniro in this one. Like, I think definitely.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Definitely the biggest question mark for SBTC, I think, was Uniro pretty much underperforming almost the entire tournament. Like, I think perhaps during the later few series stepped up a little bit, but I saw a lot of question marks. Like, a lot of SBTC fans were like, "Where's Minus? Minus was really good during the regional series. When are they going to bring Minus on for the playoffs, maybe?" But I think. I think I don't know what happened there. To me, I always say like there's a reason they're playing Uniro, right? I assume they've scrimmed with Uniro compared to Minus, or Minus isn't involved as much. I'm not sure. There was
a personal reason, I think, that Minus.
Okay, maybe that is the case. Yeah. Either way,
I know someone on the broadcast knew it, but didn't want to say. So I don't know what it was.
Okay,
but I believe there was a reason that was outside of Wild Rift, basically. But I agree. Unero, I think we even highlighted it on the broadcast quite a lot. I think he just sucked. Like he wasn't as good as the rest of the team. And I think I want to loop back to what you both said and what we discussed pre Horizon Cup, where you were like, the Baron lane is going to be a really important lane. I think jungle also did come into being a really important lane because they kind of became laners. But I think jungle as well was really important. But Baron lane has had the most bans. Like Renekton has been the most, one of the most popular picks in the entire tournament. And I think if you don't have a strong Baron laner, and I think that's the only reason that Queso even looks semi-competitive, by the way, in some of their games, because Acolyte is actually quite a strong Darius player for sure. And I think Unero just wasn't up to scratch in the Baron lane, and I think that's probably why SBTC took a little while to sort of get into the groove, because you needed to have a really strong Baron lane in this tournament, otherwise. Because split pushing has become a thing and people can actually do it now, and also because if you're playing Renekton, that is one of the most influential picks in the game in terms of mid-game team fights, and fights around objectives. Unero just wasn't playing at the level. Dooms, what did you think about SBTC?
As a whole, they've been really underperforming. Their curve is, luckily for them, getting upwards a bit. And two things, I was gonna say Uniro was really a disappointing factor at first. He got really, simply diffed by the other Baron laners of his group. Another big thing, that in first match against DKG, I spent 5 hours analyzing that match in my first YouTube video, so I've been watching them. One thing that really just caught my eyes was the focuses. They really didn't seem to be all on the same page. They've got win conditions on drafts or whatever, and they're playing around someone else. They're saying, okay, you know what, we're gonna 2v3 you, Chinese team, we can out mechanically skill you. That's not gonna happen. Stuff like that. They really entered this tournament as favorites and maybe playing a bit too much like that. They simply got clapped and got a reminder of, hey, it's an international event. You started against DKG and KT. You can't underestimate them. You gotta pay respects and make sure you're certain of what you bring. I think the schedule also really helped them because, okay, they played bad at first and got back up. They barely got back up against Tribe, who was, we discussed it, underperforming. They barely won 2-1. They only really played well the last day, in my opinion, which was against TSM, where they needed it. The schedule has been really helpful because underperforming, you prefer to do it against the two best teams of your group, which you're likely going to lose against anyway, and better win those two other matches quite shortly. I'm not saying it's a random and they don't deserve it, but they've been helped by the schedule and they've been able to step up against TSM when they need it. So I'm looking forward to see how they'll answer. But they really need to work on Baron lane, on their draft prios. If Baron lane isn't working, don't give all your prio to Renekton, Camille, whatever it is. Maybe Renekton, it's turbo broken, but whatever. And play around what makes you strong. July has been popping off lately, especially against TSM. So go play for him, go play for a duo lane if needed, and get your focuses together.
Yeah, I don't think teams need to play this Baron jungle heavy sided play that we see like DKG do, for instance. I think there are other ways to play the game. You don't need to copy DKG, and I think that's some of the other teams struggled with, right? But let's kind of. I want to move on just because I appreciate that Dooms. We have about half an hour to get through the rest of the content. So,
Not saying I told you so about Baron name, by the way, but I told you so. Then we can just skip you all getting upset about how smart I am.
Hey, I did not. I can very easily claim that jungle has been very influential.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, it wasn't a particularly bold prediction because jungle's very influential anyway.
It's so brave. He said jungle would be good.
KT then. KT has been really cool to see. KT has actually been one of my favorite growth stories this year, given the way they got absolutely clapped in the LPL LCK show match tournament. And they've obviously grown a significant amount. I think word on the ground, and you mentioned it in the last podcast, was that they were good in scrims and they clearly were a different team. And speaking of strong Baron laners, Rattel, absolutely. I mean, I think he was a little quieter in the latter half of the group, but the way they opened up the tournament with Rattel absolutely like Smurf 1v5 in games, I'm super glad to see. I think Rattel deserves the credit because I think he is the standout player. I think Isaac's also a great player. I think Doe has had some good games as well, but for me, the story kind of has been Rattel, and obviously, as you mentioned, Snitch, it has been a tournament of Baron laners and how good your Baron laner is basically in most situations. I think Rattel's like top 2 Baron laners in the competition. I think he's been really strong, especially on the very, very carry orientated picks. Like his Camille is dirty, his Camille is really, really strong. And I think that a lot of their strength and their wins have been kind of driven through Rattel being a menace in the side lane, being able to 1v1. And that's what I'm loving seeing. I feel like a lot of Baron laners and the junglers that have become pseudo Baron laners, like with the Jax picks and stuff, they've picked up the Leon mentality of just, I'm going to go at my opponent 1v1 and then I'm just going to see what happens. And a lot of them will just be strong enough to kind of outplay and have the resources to outplay and win. And I think when Wild Rift, you have to play Baron lane or side lane like that, because if you don't want to go for 1v1s, you're never going to win just through pure lane pressure and pure minion waves, because the map's too small, it's too easy to rotate, minion waves are too easy to clear. And so unless you have Baron, you can't play the side lanes that way. You have to force a man advantage. You have to force resources drawn to you. And that's partly by being strong enough to go for the 1v1s. And I think Rattel's one of those players that was able to create side lane pressure that way. And I think Rattel, to me, has been a really, really good performer for KT overall.
Yeah, I definitely think I highlighted the KT solo lanes as their win cons, but honestly, I've also been really impressed with Luna, who
True, yeah.
Debuted actually for KT at this tournament. Didn't play at all in the WCK. Debuted in Horizon Cup, and I think it's been probably the second best ADC behind Wind. Honestly, I think Wind has been pretty phenomenal, but I think Luna's been very, very solid, especially on the Corki. Had a lot of great performances. And yeah, I think the team as a whole has looked very, very strong. I think you highlighted great Lee Sin players. I think Doe actually had one of the best Lee Sin games of this tournament as well. Had a phenomenal game against SBTC, maybe? I'm not sure. I just remember there was this crazy thing. No, it might have been. It was the game 1 against Darkin, I think, actually played Lee Sin. And he had that crazy play where he got onto Huibo and Kha'Zix followed him across 3 jumps and then safeguarded behind him, kicked him away, flashed back and killed him. And it was super insane. Crazy mechanical play from Doe there, I think, who for the most part was playing a lot of Graves and kind of quiet, farming a lot and being kind of that consistent damage output, but definitely had a really flashy Lee Sin game against the Chinese superstar. So I was very impressed with that as well.
Yeah, 2 things that really stood up for me from KT were, of course, their huge performances. They entered the tournament, they're saying, you know what, we're going to give Rattel Riven. That's a good thing, and play Misfortune. People were there like, wait, what? Misfortune, really? And they just carried the heck out of it. Luna popped off on his MF Trash duo lane. It was absolutely perfect for him. Another thing, when I'm watching KT, it's a positive first. Look at their drafts. On top lane, you say Rattel is the carry. Well, guess what? He got Riven, Camille, triple Renekton against TSM, triple Fiora against DKG, and then he got what? Renekton again and Irelia against Tribe. So yeah, he's being put on those carries too. The team understands, okay, Rattel is gonna give us plenty of opportunities to win this. It's giving just best champions in the game. It's easy. Next thing though, I think they can improve on one thing. It's their prio, especially for the Fiora. I'm really disappointed in Fiora's prio in this tournament. It's way too high in my opinion. especially when you look at, the only game, they won a game against DKG with the Fiora, sure. So they've proven they can really out-macro and out-rotate DKG, which is really quite an achievement when you know DKG's macro. But the Fiora Renekton trade isn't really worth it. Like, Renekton can be 2k behind and still outworthy Fiora no matter where. He can hold in a split push, he can out-damage and out-utility her in a team fight. Yeah, there's no way this trade is worse, and I think if they correct this, they can even beat DKG, TT, and win the tournament, honestly. Like, if they keep performing well, if they've got one or two more pocket picks, like the MF pick on duo lane or whatever, go ahead, show us more stuff, and yeah, I'm putting you maybe in the finals if you keep doing like that.
I like the MF pick actually because it was so good into that particular comp. Like, you're in a quadra melee, you go Seralda's Grudge MF first, and you just put your ult in a team fight. Like, literally, those melees can't do anything. They just stood there walking like, oh, guys, I'm getting hit by every wave. And it was a really big brain pick, actually. Given that they actually lost the lane, like, quite hard. They were kind of outranged in lane really hard and struggled. Like, it had huge value in team fights. And I think it was a like, really, really great addition. I agree. I also think Luna definitely gets best package of the entire tournament award on the Corki because I agree. I kind of forgot about Luna because Rattel kind of has been the focus, but I agree. I think Luna has had an excellent debut for KT. Definitely one of the players to watch out for in the rest of the tournament. And that does bring us on to probably the tournament favorites in the form of DKG. Huiba, my favorite mid laner. I can't believe I was watching his scrim and I thought he'd for some reason.
I saw game one. I was like, oh, Huiba's on Graves. That's interesting. I thought he was the mid laner.
I legit was watching this. I was like, has he switched to mid? Okay, he switched to mid. That's crazy because he was like popping off on a car. Like, he's so good. No, but Huiba is. I'm not sure if
Jungle Akali leaked.
I'm not sure if it was Team Secret or DKG. It may be in scrims that started this because I'm assuming this is something that's been building in scrims over the last few weeks in the build-up. But obviously, Huiba brought a very different style of jungle to the Horizon Cup. Like, they basically play funnel Huiba. Like, Huiba gets waves, he gets camps, he counter jungles a shit ton more than any other jungler, in my opinion. He just looks for any opportunity to take away enemy jungle camps. And playing stuff like Jax, which isn't in like solo queue. If you look at solo queue tier list, you wouldn't classically call Jax a particularly strong jungle pick. But they funnel so many resources into him that he then becomes the pseudo Baron laner. Like, he then just becomes this guy that goes into a side lane, and because Jax takes turrets obnoxiously quickly, and when you've got a 15k gold Jax, when everyone else is like 11k in the game, he's clearly just going to 1v1 anyone that comes into lane. Huiba is for me been definitely almost like one of the MVP contenders for the entire tournament. But I think we all knew that was going to be the case coming in. I think people kind of touted him as probably the best player in the entire tournament. And I do think that DKG style plays towards him very heavily. So he's often made to look really good because his team play to make him look really good. But he has the mechanical prowess to back it up, right? Apart from that first tower dive he did at the tournament, which has made my eyes cringe. But I think overall, like, I think he's played like an excellent game. And also that's that new style of game that style of meta that was kind of introduced very early on. Team Secret copied it very quickly. And they did the same things in their games. Trebor plays a very similar style to Huiba, for instance. But that was the first game where you really saw A, Double Rift Herald working out in terms of facilitating split pushing meta, and B, like, we don't need to team fight for it. Like, the meta before this was like, let's just team fight at objectives over and over again, and the better team fight comp wins. That's part of the reason why Queso did so well over the course of Origin series, because they just drafted strong team fights and were just like, let's just fight every objective and force it. But like, I think DKG made a mistake in like one of their first games where they tried to like be greedy and double engage an objective, and they got punished for it, and then they just never team fought again until they were so strong that it didn't matter. And that's kind of the way they play. They play like this: we'll avoid team fights for the first 8 minutes of the game, and by the time that we come to team fight, our team is collectively like 10k gold ahead anyway, so it doesn't matter. We could have the worst team fight comp in the world, and we're just going to stomp you. And that's the kind of meta that they brought to the table that a lot of teams were trying to copy and catch up pace to. That they were just doing 10 times better, so you were never really going to match them on it. But yeah, that's been exciting to watch for me because it's been a very different style of game, and that's what, to me, I was really hoping we'd see at the international tournament, because I want Wild Rift to have a breadth of tactics, right? I don't want you to have to just draft the best team fight comp possible because 1-3-1s and split pushing was basically impossible to pull off previously, right? or at least not impossible, but hard. It was harder to play a true split pushing comp previously. And so I think this has been nice for me to see, because it has been showing that actually Wild Rift can have this breadth of tactics, and DKG is showing a different way to win the game, which is cool to see, I think, overall.
Yeah, I think in general, DKG have a very different approach to win the game. Like, even if you say, like, the other teams are kind of moving towards their meta, I still don't think they play it quite the same that DKG do. I think, Hueba is a jungler a Baron laner stuck in the body of a jungler. And I think, they're also a great example of that constant idea of, like, you don't need 5 superstar playmakers to be an extremely powerful team. I think YK in a tournament which is very Baron lane focused, lots of aggressive carry players, has shied away from that playstyle, and he's not afraid to play something like the Garen, play this Renekton, rushing Black Cleaver instead of the Blade of Ruin King, just playing frontline, and get, like you say, giving up resources to Hueba, who is getting the Fiora, he's getting the Jax, he's getting the Graves, and he's the player on these mechanical champions that's going to be looking to put out damage in the team fights. And YK is fine to be like, all right, it's fine, I'll play Garen, I'll silence him, I'll pop stone play and stand in the front line. He doesn't feel like, he's even, he's touched the Camille once, but he didn't play it really aggressively and go for these big carry out plays and these crazy 1v1s like you say. He played it very safely, he continued to give resources to Hueba, and he kind of just played it more about using the ult for picks and playing the macro style. And yeah, like, I think, as you say, they are very good at avoiding scenarios. I think they have got a bit they've lost their hesitation occasionally. Like you see like they go for these really crazy support engages. I keep thinking about like the one game where Emo was playing Braum and he's like ran into like 4 people as Braum, and he was just like face tagging with the shield, and he just ults and his team is like a whole screen away, and everyone's like, what are you doing? Well, there's definitely been times where they've kind of gone a bit crazy, but yeah, for the most part they're very controlled, very patient, and yeah, I do think they have this really unique style and strategy that they play towards, where yeah, they're like, okay, we're gonna funnel all the resources into the jungle. He takes both jungles, he takes both side lanes, then he comes out. There was the Jax game, I think it was against Team Secret, where he legitimately had a 10,000 gold lead in his position at the end of the game. And that's, obviously it was when they were killing the Nexus, but 10,000 gold that's like the amount of gold that most teams have when they win, and he had that just between his position. It just like, it goes to show how much gold is just funneled into him just to make him, more powerful.
Yeah, they've been really, really impressive, DKG, for sure. I think there's one thing really that impressed me even more is that they're able to play a really complex playstyle. As you said, no team was really able to bring in 1-3-1, 4-1, whatever it is against team fight, like especially even against 6 or whatever. And they've been able to say, you know what, get 6, take Senna, take whatever you want. I'm gonna kill you with, I don't know, Zeds, Graves, whatever it is. They're really playing according to their comp perfectly. So they're identifying, okay, my comp does this, their comp does that. Can we beat it with it? They're drafting around it perfectly, of course, that's needed, but they're really identifying it really well, whereas other teams might have thought, okay, you know what, I've got Fiora, I've got 2k lead, I can go team fights, maybe not the right choice against the Renekton, whatever happened, they made the right choices. And as you said, Hueba has been impressive. His mechanical skills are making able to say, you know what, I'm willing to lose 10 or 15 seconds to show up bot lane, so enemy bot lane doesn't do anything, to fake that I'm gonna go bot lane and going mid, going Baron, whatever, because other junglers would say, okay, you know what, I'm losing 10, 15 seconds by going there, maybe get a kill. He's saying, no, I lose 10 or 15 seconds to get a kill, because I'm gonna get it, there's no way I don't get it, and he's actually pulling it off. It's crazy. So that's huge. As you said, YK Snitch is popping off on the less carry, more defensive and utility role. He's tanking, so many damages in team fight, and it's crazy how they play around Hueba, but they really play around their macro. And Hueba playing carry junglers enables their macro plays. So I don't know, their mid laner, I can't remember his name exactly, can rotate whenever. Yeah, true.
It's Yo. You've got to call it.
It's Yo. Oh, it's Yo. I've never heard them say Yo on cast, but I'll retroactively believe they've said Yo.
Right. Well, whenever they wanted, they could tell, okay, you know what, Yo, you could go gang bot, gang mid, whatever, and Hueba is going to take the mid wave or whatever. So their gold management, as you say, to get 10k gold diff in a single position is huge. they're managing to not lose a single gold and even make the other team lose more gold by doing that. Like, it's absolutely crazy. I'm really just watching them all over and over again just to learn stuff. But yeah, they've been perfect, and I'm looking forward to see what they'll be able to show. Maybe some other surprises, I hope.
Actually, highlighting Yo as well, I've actually been really impressed with some of his rotations too. I think he was the first mid laner I saw, and I've actually seen this trend go towards other mid laners throughout the tournament as a response to this heavy aggressive jungle style. But he was one of the first players I saw who went, I'm just going to give it this mid wave at level 3, and I'm going to run to Baron lane, and then you can't gank my Baron lane anymore under this tower when we were ever losing matchup. And I was like, he just gave up a wave, and who farms it, of course? It's Weaver. He walks mid and he's like, oh, free wave? Don't mind if I do. But he just runs top and he's like, don't worry, YK, I know you're weak on this wave. I'm just going to stand at Krugs. They can't gank you, and then we're fine the rest of the game. And I thought that was super cool. That's such
I agree.
An easy adaptation to make, right, in theory. But not many players are willing to be like, I'm going to go a wave behind just to make it so my Baron lane can stay in the game. And then overall, long term, it's massive for them as a team, right? And then YK stays in the game. He doesn't get dove on that wave. He doesn't get zoned from that XP. And then he's completely relevant in the matchup, scaling onwards. And, obviously, like I said, if Weaver's running mid on the Graves, he's farming this wave anyway. So they're not even dropping the gold. But I think it's really cool to see a player like be so self-sacrificial for the good of the team in the kind of those small scenarios that have a massive impact on the whole game, denying those Baron lane ganks that are so prominent right now.
It's all about efficiency, though, right? Because they let Hueva have the most efficient path to get the most gold possible, and if that results him claiming a mid wave, heading straight back to jungle to continue farming, he's the one that's absorbing that gold, and they're just pathing it so efficiently. He's also the person that basically popularized the level 3/level 4 walk top twisted fate and just look for a gank. Every team started doing that. I think once they saw DKG kind of pop that into their game plan very early on, especially when YK was actually on a stronger matchup top, like the Renekton, for instance. So I think Dakun clearly have looked favorites, but I kind of agree with Dooms in the sense that I don't think many people have thought about how you can deal with that. They just try to either match it and they're worse at it, and they haven't really thought about how they could potentially deal with it. I think that's one of the things that a lot of the teams will have this couple of days off to think about. Like, how do we just either try to shut down Hueba as best as possible with a comp that's designed to kind of like deal with it, or is there something else that we can play that stops this, or at least cuts off the strength of this style of play as well? But I guess we'll have to see when we get to the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and to see if the teams have kind of managed to kind of figure that one out. We should move quickly on to Group B then. Ebro, I'll very quickly touch on. They obviously were, I think, the weakest team at the tournament. Just I think mechanically and individually, skill wise, no shame to Ebro at all. Like, they were the 3rd seed in their region. They had a bit of a miracle run to make it to the tournament in the first place. I actually think they had some solid drafts. I actually think they had some drafts that were very sensible and simple. And I think, like when you're playing at level of this competition and you may not be up to scratch versus the rest of the teams, like a sensible, simple style of play can often be a good way to approach the game. Again, like, Izez was one of my favorite junglers to watch because he was just like go hard or go home every second of the game. But I think there was not much to say about Ebro other than I just think that the region itself was a little bit more insulated and not as exposed to maybe sort of the higher competitive levels that you get on some of the other region. That's perfectly fine because they're a newer region as well, and they'll take time to develop. And I think Ebro definitely had some moments, but for the most part, they went 10k gold down at 10 minutes versus almost every single opponent. And that's okay. It's okay to to have that performance, because you still need, a lot of teams still need time to grow. Wild Rift is still very new, and Wild Rift Esports in general is still very new. But they were fun to watch, and that's kind of my takeaway. Like, Ebro, and if you saw, and I wouldn't, because this is a more Wild Rift analytical show, I'll never really reference like players the way they are on stage as much, but they were having fun even in the losses, and that was great for me to see. Just like, these guys, they were feeling happy that they were even at the tournament, I think, and that was just nice to see from Ebro. And I think they also realized that they weren't competing at the same level at this tournament. But the hope is that you take these experiences and you say, cool, let's learn for next time, and that's what I'm hoping for for Ebro and Latin America in general.
Yeah, I definitely felt like of all the, the regions that weren't China/SEA, I definitely felt like they were taking it the best of, like, yeah, they were here to just see how they did, and, they didn't come out swinging, 0-2 against Queso, and then it didn't get much better from there. I was actually really impressed with Game 1 against Sengoku, honestly, like, with the way their group performance was going, and then they hit Game 1 of Sengoku, and they had, like, this really planned out game. It was clear they were like, okay, we're gonna like have this Graves. He's gonna like look for a situation around mid. Then he's gonna go top. We're gonna dive. We're gonna super zone Renekton. You know, and they had like this really great situation against Sengoku that snowballed them into a win, and it was came out of nowhere. And I think they tried to do the same thing game 3, and Hack actually did what I just mentioned, where he just sacked a wave to stand top, so Graves couldn't dive his Baron laner again, and it could like completely deflated Ibra after that. They didn't seem to know what to do. But yeah, I definitely felt like, as you say, they kind of recognized they weren't quite the same level as everybody else, but they still gave it the rule, and yeah, they still, I think I agree, their draft seemed pretty sensible for the most part, and they had their moments with some close fights, but yeah, overall it just felt like they were probably the mechanically weakest team at the tournament.
Yeah, Ibro has been showing off what they can, at least. They've been showing off even quite some fun on stage, as you said. They were here to learn. They learned, I hope, a lot. And as you said, their drafts were really good. As a draft lover, I couldn't really ask for more. Just looking at the first draft, for example, against TQ, they managed to get Renekton, Xayah Rakan, Galio, and Jarvan. Like,
yeah, that first draft was a disaster.
All 4 are top priority picks. It's crazy. So yeah, they have the good prios. They know how they should be playing it. Maybe some mechanical differences. They got to learn from it and improve. Yeah, they've been having fun. They've been trying stuff. Getting the ASOL out in game 2 was just like, okay, you know, we're trying and we're seeing what it's gonna give us. Why not? And yeah, it's a good thing. And I hope they're gonna be improving and getting back to their region, showing what they learned, and get back to us next year.
Look out for that bug, Excoundrel.
What's that? Sorry.
Look out for that bug,
mate. I've got a ring light on, and it's like the only light on, and I now have a collection of bugs. It is the only light source for these bugs.
Now, welcome on, new guest, Bug. What did you think about Ibro? You got any input for us, or?
Too busy attached to my ring light. Team Queso, then, this is probably the one that we're going to be most passionate about. You know, I think as a European region, and I'll be frank, I was maybe expecting a little more. I was in my heart, I was hoping that we'd be good enough to beat Sengoku and maybe sneak third. I always thought that would be the place that if we were going to get out of groups, it would be as the third team. I don't think we were going to beat Thunder Talk and Team Secret realistically. And I'll be honest with you, I think quarterfinals was our tops. I genuinely think quarterfinals would have been our absolute best scenario for Team Queso. And when it came to it, I think, you know, we often played quite weak side Baron with Acolyte, like on Darius a lot of the time, which is fine. Like Darius Renekton matchup the standard, right? Like that's if you're going to have a standard matchup for the Horizon Cup, like Darius Renekton has been like the standard. If I'm not willing to play Fiora, for instance, or I'm not willing to play something a bit more carry orientated, if I want to be like a frontliney, I'll just play Darius into Renekton. And that was kind of Acolyte's stance. And don't get me wrong, Acolyte actually had some good performances on Darius. I actually think there was a game, I think it might have been versus was it versus Team Secret or versus Thunder Talk, where like they literally forced Acolyte away from tower level 3.
It was Team Secret. I don't know what you mean. Yeah, it was Team Secret.
And most Baron laners have been like, I can't lose 2 waves. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to get died. But Acolyte was like, okay, I trust my team. Like I'm going to back off and I'm going to get back to tower when I can. Which I think takes a lot of mental fortitude to watch that many waves just disappear under tower, especially in Wild Rift.
His team did nothing, and then he would never do it ever again for the rest of his life. So they've broken him in his spirit. It was tragic, really.
I actually think for some reason Ruiz played away from his comfort this tournament, and I think that I really would have loved just Ruiz to just stick to the champs that he was good at. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think his other champs that he picked up were bad, but like I would love to have just seen Galio mid more from Ruiz when it was open, and you know, and these kind of like more like heavy impact, heavy kind of like team fight champs, because that's what he was really strong at in the Origin series. And I feel like he kind of played away from his strengths, maybe to try and contest the meta that we were seeing from scrims and so on and so forth. Andre had a really bad tournament, and I love Andre. I think he's a great player, but I really don't think Andre had the performance of his life for this tournament. I think Team Queso needed Andre to play really well because he's the best player on that team. Ibu and Memorized. I'm not going to talk about the Draven game, but Ibu and Memorized clearly weren't on their usual. I mean, I never really thought that their bot lane was the strongest bot lane in EU, but I think they also didn't have the best performance. But I don't want to rag on Team Queso too much because the level of competition was really high. You know, and I don't really want to like. I'm more because I'm really passionate about EU and I really wanted us to do well. I just think Andre played a little bit below his peak. I think Team Queso maybe drafted away from what they were really good at. I think Acolyte actually did have a really good tournament overall, given he was usually very weak side, to be honest with you. Yeah, and obviously IBO Memorized had a couple of level 1 oopsies. But I think overall, like, this was about what I expected. I would have loved just to get out of groups, but it was about what I expected for our region. And I think Team Queso can be proud that they actually, in some games, did try to show up, but realistically, again, we played a very different meta to SEA in China, and clearly that our meta wasn't comparable in terms of matching, or at least we didn't really know how to figure out and deal with their meta as quickly enough as we should have done. Apart from just Queso slightly underperforming in some key roles, I can't really say much more about it. Realistically, I just feel like it was us just not quite playing at the level that we expected, Queso to be. But maybe that was just because the meta wasn't really suiting their style of play coming into the tournament.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I feel like Queso and Tribe are just two sides of the same coin, really. Where, yeah, I also feel like Queso got lost in the world's meta. And like you say, like, we had Ruiz on first picking TF, and I'm not saying he can't play the champ, but it definitely wasn't his high prior champ. The Origin series, it was the Ari and the Galio and then the Diana fullback. And then it was like, the Ziggs TF, I'd say, were his next two. Obviously, the Ziggs is normally banned, but yeah, it was weird to see this total shift up. And yeah, I really felt like Andres, and I can't necessarily say, I don't know the inner dynamics. It's tough to say if it's all on him or if it's just on the way the team is going. But I felt like they really lost their way of, like, they were originally a team that definitely played really aggressively through mid. Having been on the other side of that, I can definitely assure you they love to level 2 gang mid at every opportunity they can. But we didn't see that once from this tournament, and I think part of that is because jungle has trended towards this, I clear 2 camps and then I AFK mid and push some waves until the crabs come up, so I have Prio in one lane, and every jungler is doing that, so suddenly mid laners are never vulnerable. But I do feel like once that was removed from Queso, they just didn't really know where to go with the games anymore, They didn't really play through Acolyte, even though he was having a solid tournament. They never did the same kind of Baron lane dominant strategies like other teams were doing, where they would heavily dive top lane and get their top lane really ahead, or like even in the games where, we mentioned where Acolyte was left on his lonesome and giving up waves, and they had this aggressive Draven, they didn't find anything in bot lane, they didn't find any way to punish the bot side, they didn't go for a dive, Normally we'd see Andres and Ruiz tagging up and then pushing out mid, and then they'd walk to the dragon lane and they'd 4-man dive the enemy dual lane, that was happening a lot in the Origin series, and we just didn't see these kind of set plays from Queso at all that they were so used to. And yeah, I think you have to tie it mainly to the draft. And I mean, I know Ari got nerfed, so it's not as good as it used to be necessarily, but I think the champ is still playable for what Ruiz and Andres wanted to accomplish, especially the way they used to play. So I mean, yeah, you have to assume that it was kind of like, yeah, scrims just weren't going well, and it kind of killed their confidence in their original style. Because yeah, I really felt that they just super lost the way they were playing at Origin, and they just didn't even look like the same team. They didn't know, like, they didn't look like they knew how they wanted to win. They didn't know what lane they wanted to play through necessarily, or what they wanted to draft to give themselves an advantage. They were kind of just like, we're going to farm and get to mid-game, I guess, and then maybe we can win a fight at second Drake, and we will snowball. That's just what it felt like. Every game was like that to me, and the early game was just super AFK, everybody's just clearing waves, and then praying that they kind of get to this midpoint.
Yeah, there's 2 notes for Queso. I'll start by being really, really honest. If I had to analyze TQ or like describe them to a random stranger, I'm gonna say, you know what, they might not be the best mechanically skilled in EU. I don't think I'll hurt anyone by saying that, but I would even say maybe the top 3 team of the third team of the top 3 in EU. But their team fight was simply amazing. Through the roof, they played it perfectly. They were together. It was perfectly synergized, and yeah, they did it well, and they deserved to be there. 2 things that frustrate me a bit here is, as you said, maybe Andres performed less, but most of all, he drafted some early game champions. Impact, as you said, as per usual, their game is through mid. Go get Ruiz ahead. Don't draft a TF, because TF is to put side lanes ahead, and that's not who you are. Draft a Galio, Ari, Diana, whatever you want. Get your Lee Sin, which Andres had a lot this tournament. Get your mid ahead, or get some Prio and go with Ruiz, put side lanes ahead. We didn't see that enough. As you said, he AFK'd a lot. The most frustrating part for me was, I guess they were pressuring themselves too much, I don't know, but the team fight wasn't just as good. We often saw TQ focus 3 to 4 different people, which is a lot when you're only 5 to aim, aiming for 4 different people. We often saw them engaging fights 3v4 or something like that, often Ibu wasn't in the fight or Ruiz or whatever.
Mm.
When you draft around ADC, as they've been doing a lot, they've been really saving the last pick's ADC, getting a carry ahead that you can really farm with. If he's not in a fight, you're not going to get much damage out. So that was the biggest issue for me. It's okay, maybe Ibu did a bit like Redemption in Origin series, have a lot of pressure on his shoulders, maybe put too much himself on it, and yeah, just relax a bit. Maybe take example of Memo. I'm not going to say this often, but Memo has played the best Gragas, or at least one of the best Gragas I've ever seen in his last game. Absolutely scandalously good. I'm really looking forward to see if Gragas will be more picked by other teams after. Yeah, his Gragas was just everywhere. It felt like, yeah, he felt relieved. He's there like, okay, you know what? You maybe got one game left. Let's just give it all. Let's not give a F to keep Snitch's channel alive. Yeah, just go for it and have fun and show what you got. And that's maybe the sad part. I feel pressure got to them more than anything else. Like, yeah, draft have been a bit better, but we don't know what their priors are. We don't know exactly. Mechanically, it was okay, but not perfect. I guess it's really okay. Their strength became their weakness in a span of what, 2 or 3 weeks. And if they can get that back, they're good to go for 2K22.
Yeah, I think there was a game specifically where we saw them versus Secret where James played Rakan and then you saw Memorize play Rakan, and you could just see the desynchronicity of those team fights. Like just how Memorize was looking for the engagers versus how James was setting them up was so different, and it never really felt like Case were on the same page when it came to those team fights, which was one of the big reasons, as you said, Doom, that they were so good in Origin Series, that they were always on the same page. You know, but they were also, I don't know if you saw them, they were a lot quieter on stage this time round as well. You didn't have that same energy that you had in the Origin Series, and I think that's something that because they started off slow at the Origin Series. They did not have those pop-off performances like right from the very beginning. It took a while for them to ramp up, and I think it's when that energy was building. But yeah, I think just as you mentioned, I think they got inside their own heads before the tournament started. I think they really got inside their own heads and they tried to adjust too hard, based on what they were doing in scrims. I think they were getting slaughtered in scrims from what I heard. Like, I think they were really struggling. And they must have overthought that what they were doing was bad rather than just thinking stage is a different game, right? Scrims and stage are a different beast. Like, you should stick to what you're really good at, and I think they played away from what they're really good at, and I think that kind of outplayed themselves a little bit when it came to stage games. But anyway, we have like 15 minutes max here, and we've got 3 more teams to go through. Sengoku for me were the really pleasant surprise of the tournament, especially because I really love Rush and Hack. I think they're really nice people, and they're just like really like lovable as well. A lot of pedigree on that team, and I actually think like they were a team that generally tended to, like, in my eyes, they played very much like that 2v2 mid. Like, Rush did what Andre did to, like, you, Snitch, in most games. Like, Rush was like, I'm going mid level 2. Like, I don't care. I'm going to, like, whatever happens, I'm, like, putting Hack ahead. Like, and that was one of the only teams that did that successfully. But it shows you, if you play that style, like, there is some success to be had. Obviously, not as much as you got from maybe some of the other stars that we saw from like the sort of the Chinese teams and Southeast Asian teams. But Rush played Andre Origin Series. Like Rush was cosplaying Andre Origin Series, where he just went mid, tried to get either relieved pressure for Hack or got Hack ahead, and then translated that to elsewhere on the map. He was the guy who picked Lee Sin and actually did shit early, which is something that Andres didn't do. So. I was very surprised by Sengoku, and I thought they were really awesome. I also think Juan was pretty impressive as an AD carry. Like, I think he kind of went a little bit under the radar as well. And Kai, great Baron lane. I wasn't expecting that from Kai, I don't think, but he actually had some really solid Renekton performances. I think overall, in general, I was surprised by the majority of the Sengoku roster. But Russian Hack clearly still got that 2v2 synergy. They still played through that very heavily early game, and it kind of paid off for them, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was really impressed, honestly, with the components that weren't Hack and Rush. Like, I felt like Kai had a lot of great games, especially early in the group, and I felt like Juan and Dejuo were both very solid. Dejuo pretty much seemingly single-handedly bringing Alistar into the meta. It almost felt like. I didn't feel like any team looked that interested in it, and then he kind of popped off day 1, and then day 2, every team was like, well, we better pick Alistar away from him, and I'm like, is Alistar like a first pick now? What's going on, man? But, they looked really solid, even outside of kind of that mid-core jungle the mid-jungle core duo, and yeah, I was definitely impressed with just the Japanese players in general.
Yeah, Sengoku have been, for me, they're a bit like, at the spot TQ has in my mind, like, okay, whoever gets third in Group A has succeeded in his tournament, can be happy and maybe won't go much farther, I think. But yeah, Sengoku can really be happy of the tournament. Hack and Rush are performing really well. As someone said it in the chat, yeah, they trust each other, and yeah, we can see that definitely. They're playing off each other, and it's absolutely wonderful. One thing I'm really not doubting, but I'm really thinking they're not consistent enough. We've seen them take a game from TT, which is wonderful for real, but then they're losing 2-0 to Secret with underperformances. They even get 6 in both games. So yeah, what's happening? How is it going? How they can improve will determine a lot what can happen in quarterfinals. But yeah, I think they can already be really happy with what they did. They've been showing Japan is worth the top 6 for sure, over other people, so EU and A, whatever it is. But yeah, I think they can be happy and just enjoy what's left and show whatever they got.
Dropped a game against Ebro as well, which I think is lends to that consistency point too.
I don't think they are out of the running versus KT, though. I will say that I don't think it. No, don't give me that face. I would not be surprised if they pick up a game versus KT. I really won't be surprised if they pick up a game.
They're gonna get slaughtered.
Okay. We'll talk about that very briefly at the end because we're not going to have too much time to talk about the Coast quarterfinals. But Team Secret was a team that I think have leveled up quite heavily from the SEA series. I think they've played really well. I actually have been really impressed with Team Secret overall. I think obviously they are emulating DKG pretty heavily in the way that they play the game, but they're doing it quite successfully. My only query is, are they going to be good enough to beat the original? If it was, of course, DKG that kind of pioneered this style in scrims. But I think Treybol's doing a great job of playing Hueba light. You know, like he's playing very Hueba style champions, the Fioras and the Jaxes in the jungle, and it's working out well for them. Tatsuri and Azar are beasts. And I think the unsung hero of that entire roster is James. I think he has excellent support games. I think it's very difficult. Oh god, flies! It's very difficult to It's getting annoying now. I have the one bright light in this room, and they're just like, ha. It's very difficult, I think, to sometimes pinpoint supports as being super influential, because often when a support does his job well, you don't really notice. But I think James has had, especially his Rakan games, have been really impressive.
I've noticed James, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's easy to notice how good James is at commandeering engages and kind of getting his team on the same page. But I think in a meta right now that's dominated by strong solo laners and a jungler that can play the same kind of role as Hueba does. Tatsuri clearly has a very, very cool champion pool that not many other mid laners have got, and he has played some excellent games. I think Azar had an absolutely unbelievably good game on Fiora. I think was that versus Queso?
That was Queso, farmed him.
He absolutely
farmed him.
But I think this is just a team that is clearly relish being in person. They clearly vibe really well together when they're playing on stage, and I think James has been, I think they've looked like the best teamfight team at the tournament. I think because other teams have played away from teamfights a lot of the time, but I think that Team Secret look like the best teamfight team at the tournament. Just through the way they actually start those engages and when James actually kind of facilitates everything. I felt that they've been in the 5v5 the strongest kind of team in that respect. So I think Team Secret got a good shot at the tournament. They really do.
Yeah, I think it's definitely reasonable. I think the biggest question mark for me for Team Secret is some of the drafts just feel really inconsistent and just kind of random. I felt like it was a big issue they had at SCA as well, where it felt like they sometimes just tried to 5-head it a bit too hard. They started playing a lot of, they're the only team that's actively playing Ezreal now, suddenly, just kind of out of nowhere, and then they keep the James Janna, and I'm like, it's getting it done, but at the same time, I'm like, maybe that might have, was that SBTC she was playing Ezreal? I might be getting it backwards. Either way, I remember the Team Secret, I think it was SBTC playing the Ezreal Janna, apologies, but there was definitely the one game where Tatsuri drafted Yasuo with 0 knockups, literally they had nothing on their team at all to facilitate him, and he was like, I'm just gonna play Yasuo here, and then they got totally turbo rolled, and I was like, I don't know what you thought would happen. I don't know what, you had complete counterpick, and this is what you chose, and I don't know what we thought would go on here. So there's definitely times where I do feel like they try to think a bit too hard in the draft. But yeah, I think for the most part, they just play stable and just draft a bit consistent. I think, yeah, they definitely have a great shot against SBTC, who have looked pretty, especially Azar Uniro, for example, just feels insanely Azar favored based off the performances of this tournament. So I feel like that would be a big thing for them for sure. But yeah, I definitely agree that the solo laners look solid and their team fighting has been good. And Hammers' Rakan is turbo cracked. I don't know. He might be the best support of the tournament.
I think so.
Yeah, his MS has been really performing well. Talking about drafts, yeah, they've been either really mysterious, let's say, or really, really good. Like their priors are really established in their head. Okay, you know what? We're gonna draft around Baron laners. There are so much. It's pretty easy to draft around. Then you got the Lee Sin prio, who's huge on Trevor. He's performing amazingly. He's really making differences. Maybe one of the only junglers for me that with Lee Sin makes differences because other junglers did too, but making differences as Lee Sin should make differences. Early game, maybe less ganks, but impact your lanes to get them ahead. That's the goal of Lee Sin, that's why you draft him, and he actually does that. In addition to popping off in team fights and whatever, of course. And then, yeah, the other huge prio is Varus. Like, we're playing around top lane, Azar is good. Well, you know what? Draft a Varus, get your support to rotate wherever you want, as we said in episode 1, and get a Varus to just clean your wave through 1Q, maybe another spell needed, 1 auto attack, and you're good to go. You're Gucci in the turret. They're playing it really well. Their team fight is very easily drafted too. Like, I feel they don't have a complexly drafted team fight. Their drafts are really quite easy to play. Okay, like they drafted Katarina, okay, she's jumping in when she got a kill, easy. Go next, like they're drafting easy stuff, but they're applying it really well, and as long as it works, I'm good. I'm happy for them. I think their best shot at this all is playing around Azar for sure, keeping a weak side kind of bot lane where you can just clear from far. And keep playing around your champion pool. As you said, they've been pulling out the Janna, they've been pulling out Katarina, Yasuo without anything. Top lane has played Renekton, Darius, Jax, whatever. They've played Rakan and Gragas support, like pretty much anything. So I think you can't really counter draft them. Your best shot is drafting yourself the best you could. But yeah, it's a really big asset that you take away when you can draft pretty much anything.
Yeah, I did check it up, and it was actually Hamas playing the Janna, but I did feel like those games, for example, and I think they were the ones against Sengoku, I think there's some point at Hamas was like 0-4 on the Janna or something, and I'm not saying, like, it's kind of whatever, he had a weird early game, and he kind of just kept getting ganked, but it's also like, their identity in this tournament has been this great team fighting team with Hamas leading these amazing engages, and then it's like, oh, if we put him on Janna, we could completely dismantle this comp, and we're gonna have a great position, and it's like, and then he's playing Janna, and he's like 0-4, and they don't really look as together as they do when he's playing this Rakan, and he can bring them together in this engage, and that's what I mean, where it's like, are they trying to outdraft a bit too hard and kind of leaning away from some of their strengths? That's what I'd be nervous about going into SBTC is, they try to trip them up too much, and then they kind of trip themselves up by leaning too much into, like, this draft would be perfect, as opposed to if we draft this, we'll perform really well.
We've got like 3 minutes to do Thunder Talk. So I'm going to give you a really
Z-Good!
Faybite also really good. There you go. There's my analysis of Thunder Talk. I think, look, I'm going to be honest, there were some games where Z basically single-handedly carried the game. So that to me has felt like the identity. I think Thunder Talk's identity is their solo laners. What is this fly doing, man? Get off. He's like there. Look at it. Look at this little bastard. Their identity is their solo laners. That's it. There you go. Boom.
Yeah. I mean, I think Fabai, solid player, weird champion pool. I think it's a big question mark going forward to the tournament. He's really not playing the meta, and I hear the cast is like, he's so zany and he plays all these weird flex picks, and I'm like, no, he's a mid laner who's been forced into Baron, then so he's playing Diana. Like, it is what it is. Like, I get that he hasn't had the time to adapt to the role, but he does look solid on the picks he can play, which is like Renekton, Diana, Gragas, and then hopefully something else past that, because pick Azure, right? Is the ADC. Has been mostly consistent as a solid secondary carry for the most part. He hasn't been as influential as Fabi or Z, but has been solid, just a bit quieter. So yeah, I just think it mostly comes down to what Chris and S12K play like, and then yeah, if they can get Fabi one of his picks, because I do think if you do isolate his hero pool, I do wonder what comes after those initial 3, because I don't know what else he's practiced.
Yeah, he's been forced out one game and he played Vayne top, so I'm pretty scared
Indeed, yeah.
not gonna lie. We'll see how that goes, but as you said, yeah, at least his games on those 3 champs are huge, so having to ban those 3 offs, or like ban 2 and pick the first one, pick the remaining one, I mean, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna add a lot of strains in your draft, but why not? It's worth trying. I think there's 2 stuff about TT. One, as you said, their picks might sometimes be weird. There's one huge positive thing that really surprised me and comforted me into my TT prediction of episode 1, is that they lost their first game against TS while being called pretty much the favorites. And simply, okay, you know what? We're not gonna stress. It's the team we gotta face for top 2. Like if we get second, we might face DKG or whatever later. So yeah, no, let's assure first place. And they're beating TS by getting back to their roots, not stressing, not panicking, whatever. They're getting back to what they have to do. They actually pull it off. T1 and they 2-1 Team Secret. It's what you got to do, and they did it. So I'm really happy for them. I think even if they get surprised or get forced into a draft or whatever, they can adapt pretty fast and find their way back to victory pretty easily.
I just read about the S12K Malphite. I totally repressed that, man. I was gone from my mind until I read it again. Oh, no.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about the S12K. Guys, we unfortunately do have to wrap things up now because Doom has got a very important call that he has to go to. So very quickly, one word. Who wins KT Rolster Sengoku? I'm going to say KT Rolster, even though I'd like Sengoku to win an SBTC versus Team Secret. I think it's probably going to be Team Secret.
I think it's probably KT Rolster and Team Secret, yeah. I think I just want to see Team Secret draft consistently because I think they've been playing better. So I think if they just draft a solid draft, they should be able to beat SBTC pretty handily. And I think KT are just a much better team, sadly, even though I do really like Hack and Rush's personalities.
I would like to say something else just to beat you if it happens, but yeah, I'm gonna have to go with KT 2-0. In my opinion, it's really clear.
It's the best of 5.
Yes. I wouldn't be surprised if SBTC wins, but yeah, I'm betting on TS for sure. They've been consistent and they can do it.
Cool, boys. That was great. I love this episode. Snitch, wind it down.
Okay, we're winding it down. This has been the Wild Esports podcast. Obviously, a bit of a more abrupt ending. Would have liked to keep it going a bit longer. You can blame me. I was a bit late, and now Dooms has to go. It's basically my fault. So I'll take the rap for it. But yeah, I've been Snitch. This has been Excoundrel and Dooms. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We're really looking forward to the finals for the Rising Cup. I know Excoundrel will be on the desk. One of these games, he'll be casting away. Do you know which one you're doing?
I'm casting the semi-final, Dakun Gaming semi-final.
Okay, so that's very exciting. I will be doing co-streams of the entire weekend. I'm sure Dooms will be doing some analysis on his YouTube channel. You can definitely check that as well. I've been really enjoying his videos. Now he's a bit less cringe because he knows how to use hashtags in his description, which he didn't do before. It was quite embarrassing, but we've amended that. But yeah, this has been the Wild of Esports podcast. A bit of a more rushed episode, but hopefully you enjoyed it all the same, and we got to hit you with some knowledge coming up into this weekend. And yeah, I hope you'll all have a great Horizon Cup, and hopefully we can do another episode soon to kind of wind it down and talk about the eventual winners, KT Rolster Y. It'll be very exciting. Can't wait to see Rattel lift that trophy. Except in fact it might be Z, or who knows, it could even be Team Secret. At this point, I think it's a pretty fair game for anybody. I think a lot of teams will look great this tournament. I'm excited to see the styles clash. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you all again on the next episode. Bye. We'll all wave again. Any wavers? Hey, that was more of a salute, but alright, I'll we'll see you guys next time.